SK Telecom T1 versus G2. Game number 4 is our VOD review, but I think it's important for both the stream and also the VOD to talk about how this series started and what led up to game number 4. So we're going to go game by game from gamesoflegends.com. So game number 1 had questions around this is the Sona Taric game. And my impression here is that this was a really good drafting game from the side of SKT because they actually presented G2 with a scenario that they hadn't considered, at least if you trust Caps's Listen Loco interview with Thorin and Loco Doco. And it's the same thing I said on the caster desk is I think G2 put zero time in their minds to consider if Sona Taric would be left available. I think they had no like even suspicion that Sona Taric would be left open. And the moment that they happened this draft, they sat down there and they thought about how can you beat SK Telecom T1. And if you consider SKT's identity as a team that while they had grown in kind of assertiveness, they had become a bit more explosive as the tournament gone on. Like they were still a super methodical team, but they're very unlikely to like not draft a bit of scaling. Like SKT really do draft scaling team fight more often than not. You see Sona Taric is open, you say, wow, scaling team fight, we can't lose that with Sona Taric, let's lock that in. And you think that SKT is going to be less likely to punish you than, say, for example, Invictus Gaming's Camille or G2 themselves. You sit down and say, okay, Sona Taric outscales everything. If SKT go down the way we think they will and go scaling themselves, we'll just take this. It'll be a free win. There's no way they can punish us as much as IG. And that's why they locked it in. They were like, okay, let's just go this way. And I think SKT came in super well prepped for this. And from level 1, it was their playstyle. Because I actually think the draft from SKT was very bold. Like Karma Ezreal is not the sort of Draven Blitzcrank lane that we actually saw punishing Sona Taric super hard with very reproducible reasons to do so, right? And the reason why Ezreal Karma isn't that way is the kill pressure on this lane 2v2 is very, very low. What it does do is it punishes the Sona Taric 2v2 playstyle pretty extensively. Like this is a lane where Sona wants to walk up and just farm free gold from her GP10 item, you know, Spell Thieves, while Taric as a melee champion with no lane presence last hits. So Taric is trying to get melee last hits, really hard to do against Karma and Ezreal poke. And Sona's going to take a lot of ranged poke when she tries to walk up. So in the 2v2 side, you can say, okay, I see it, keep their health bars low, bring Jarvan in, you're going to get double kills. Like you can understand it, but I think it's pretty risky tact to take. It's not as guaranteed as a hard engage support like a Leona or a Blitzcrank. And in the end, it was a bit of a wash because it didn't matter what the 2v2 looked like when level 1 was so toxic for G2. Like they lost so many summoners, they lost first blood. I think SKT came in prepped with a style they thought would beat Sona Taric, but this was actually my nightmare draft for SKT against G2. After I saw SKT lose, I was like, they're going to leave Sona Taric open in an important game, have a style they think beats it, and then not be able to beat it because they don't play explosively enough to win. And credit to SKT. They actually did, come in, play a fast level 1 that probably went too far in their hands. Like it was a bit too generous for them. But I think in general, like the Lissandra out of meta here, like Lissandra versus Morgana is a farm lane for Morgana and a lane where Lissandra's wave clear nerfs can actually have a pretty severe hurt on her if she doesn't out-roam. They drafted a lot of hard crowd control. They roamed a lot. They knew Ezreal Karma would be pushing and got further kills. And like people are saying, G2 didn't play the early game particularly well. So we definitely got a low roll G2 and a high roll SKT. But I will say, if you're going to leave it open SKT, at least you were able to draft the crowd control around to make the aggressive plays, because on paper, I must admit, was not convinced about Ezreal Karma's validity in this matchup. I think if you don't play the fast stuff, you don't have Lissandra Kennen, maybe there's no way you can reproduce this victory. So I'm not saying, shout out guys, Ezreal Karma's the counter. I don't think that's the way you go. But I will say that SKT played this game very well. But it was also a victory where you're like, it doesn't really mean anything for the series. Like, I sat there with Vedius, during the analyst test between game 1 and 2 and said, there's no chance G2 tilt off this loss. It was decided so early in the game. A Sonataric game is almost like playing a game of Hearthstone before you play Dota, before you play a League of Legends game. Just because Sonataric or Funnel, like these game states, are so irrelevant compared to what League of Legends is usually fought as, because it's so much about doing your own thing and not dying, and you'll always win, because Sonataric has this like annoying flow-on effect of infinite vision plus infinite heals plus infinite teamfight victories, that like there's no way you tilt off this loss. You're like, okay guys, we shouldn't have gone for the Sonataric, we got baited a bit, let's go back to our prep. That's how I thought G2 would react to this. So we move on to game number 2, and a reminder that we're reviewing game number 4 for anyone joining late. Get to game number 2, and we hope that the website... Oh yeah, we got to find it. So this is where SKT actually kind of bite the bullet and ended up being what we kind of worried SKT was and only would be in this game. Like, this is where SKT drafts a wombo engage teamfight comp to try to hard engage on Draven through the Black Shield, and if you send Vi, Hecarim, Rakan, Sylas at the Draven, someone will get there. So you understand why that happens is, Razzleplasm. Amusingly, the alert doesn't come up, but I got the Razzleplasm resubscribe. He said, request, can you not review the IG series? Well, good news. Your takeaway, if you're joining the stream live now, can be that I never reviewed it. Unfortunately, if you were here, you would have known that it's already been reviewed, and there will be a VOD to commemorate it. But if your truth is one that only extends from right now to the future, no IG reviews coming in the near future. Thank you, Raz, for the resub. Love you, man. The problem that happened here for SKT is Draven Morgana is a super hard counterpick to Zyra Khan. I always talk about North America being the one to bring in Caitlyn Morgana, and Draven Morgana is down the same school of thought. The Draven Morgana hurts even more because you just blow up Rakan so easily after all his base stat nerfs over time. So that's a hard counterpick for G2. Caps has been super reliable at winning the Akali Sylas matchup on both sides. Also, he's the best Akali player we had at the tournament, so it was bold to leave open first pick Akali, let's say. And then they actually lost in priority in top side as well because Nico will easily beat a Hecarim. Hecarim has no way to interact with a Nico. It's hard outranged because Hecarim has 350 range on his helicopter Q. Nico has an auto attack, so nothing you can do. So actually, SKT drafted full scaling team fight, and the only thing they had against the Nico was Vi plus Hecarim ult, so pre-6, nothing, and then you need to not be spotted on the way to top side as the Vi, otherwise still not going to work. So this is a super bold draft to take against G2, who, can snowball so hard from, the mid-game point onwards. And this game had lots of pauses. It was a pretty underwhelming game to watch as a spectator because we had the 40-minute pause halfway through. But while SKT, I think, played pretty well in the early game, in spite of their draft, they ended up being dragged down by their draft, and Caps, was able to roll through. So credit to G2, but this was my fear in the matchup. It's why SKT had some struggles in the matchup against G2, because SKT always feel like, when in doubt, make sure you have team fight supremacy. And unfortunately, I just don't think that's the way that wins in 2019. It's the stubbornness and the inflexibility to change that we've seen from Korean teams that I think does need to be held up to the microscope as these international failures get piled up. Finally, Game 3 was another intriguing one because actually Game 3 was more similar to Game 1 than I think people gave credit for. You don't see a Sonataric here from G2, but G2 drafts scaling. The moment you go Azir Vladimir, and it's Kai'Sa versus Varus, your team is scaling. This is G2. The soul of the decision that got them the Sonataric in game number 1 comes back here, but with stronger laning in that it says basically, this game will reach a point where there's no way SKT can team fight. But there's a reason that we call it the S word on the LCK broadcasts. Scaling, right? Scaling is a dirty word. Just like shit is a dirty word. We don't say shit, and we feel very worried about saying scaling on a professional broadcast because in the last year, the scaling comp never gets there. Because the game has so much gold pre-14 minutes, and the game just has so much gold in it earlier that you're getting those completed kills from ahead that you weren't before. Turrets are blowing up like they weren't before. And even though G2 got a 34-minute game, they got to 30 minutes, they got over 50k gold, this game was largely decided by a Clid pop-off. Like, Clid had one of the best individual games we've seen in an international tournament ever. This was unbelievable hard carry. Just the most ridiculous pop-off game from Clid. He was fucking amazing in this game. Like, he was so insanely strong. It is the best Rek'Sai game I've seen played since SK Telecom T1 versus KT Rolster in the LCK Summer 2016 Gauntlet, where Score had a game on Rek'Sai where he successfully ganked Duke, Faker, and Bang & Wolf in the first 10 minutes and won the game. This was just an unbelievable hard carry from Clid. He was so amazing. And yet they still almost lost in this game because of the scaling on the side of G2. So it shows you that G2, in spite of, like, you know, the finger wagging of, oh, scaling is the S word, the core read of, like, we'll probably get to late game against SKT was almost right, if not for Clid having the highest high roll game ever. Like, this was some unbelievable Rek'Sai play in this game. So, yeah, I don't think the G2 read was wrong, but just the fact that I can come away from this series being like, yeah, I think G2 had SKT figured out more often than SKT had them figured out. Times are changing, huh? Times are definitely changing. So this is where we end up in game number 4, which will be our second VOD review of the night. G2 versus SKT. Again, sorry, I'm going to have to use some manual controls here, so we'll play it back at 1.5 times speed. Turn the volume down. Oh, that's good enough. Oh, this was, of course, the game we didn't get to do pick and ban in. That's right. We were shut up. Vedius and PapaSmithy silenced. The ESL special from Riot Games. If you guys aren't aware, ESL reviews, does analyst desk, does pick and bans. First time this happened in a while on international broadcast, that's for sure. Razzleplasm in the stream, also on the stream, very nice. So we see how the bands are coming together in this particular game. So SKT, to their credit, don't make the same mistake they did in game number 1 and game 2, where Akali kind of hard carry won the game. I actually agree with SKT's bans here. I think they're really good. G2's bans show a lot of respect to Mata. Teddy and Mata, what they showed in the second round robin that teams are adapting to is that they could play the kind of carry lanes or the more high impact bot lanes that they hadn't been playing the first round robin. SKT dropped their Tahm Kench priority on day 2 or 3 and went basically fully into more pick lanes like Lucian Braum and Lucian Galio style lanes. So I actually like the Galio ban a lot from the side of G2. Jarvan makes sense, you know, on Clid's side. It does mean you give up Rek'Sai, but I think giving SKT Rise is more scary than giving SKT Rek'Sai, even after Clid just hard carried a game. Like, Rek'Sai is such a binary champion in that, you know, she can pop off, right? But it feels so weird to call her binary because she can gank from such super creative vantage points, like a Shaco style, but she really only has one target knockup, a lot of burst damage in the early to mid game, and then nothing else. Like, there's just no fallback for Rek'Sai outside of being able to have some map hacks. So given all of that, I do agree with leaving the Rek'Sai open and taking the Rise. Varus Braum means that there will not be a hard winning bot lane for SKT on the bot side. So I don't mind the Tahm Kench here. It's like the first Tahm Kench I believe they had in quite a long time in this particular tournament after dropping it early in the tourney. And G2 have the start of the sort of draft they love to play. Like, you look at G2 with Ryze, and you already think 1-3-1. It's not with the Tahm Kench, but coming into the second round, we were spitballing different picks that they would consider as AD carry. So you don't take Kalista into Varus Braum. Teddy had the infinite KDA Kalista that he came into in this series. He hadn't died on Kalista. But you don't pick Kalista Tahm Kench as a duo. They have very little lane presence, and you want aggressive Kalista lanes. Also, Varus Braum is not actually susceptible to Kalista in the way that the Kalista into Tahm Kench picks that SKT were preferring are. So you have to go for a bit more synergy between the Tahm Kench and the AD carry, and Ashe Tahm Kench is a real LCK standard that we see time and time again. And we finally see the Rek'Sai versus Skarner matchup. There were so many drafts where I sat with the casters and I was like, surely we're going to see Skarner versus Rek'Sai. This is a really good matchup for Skarner. And it's one that Jankos had been not picking when he had the option for a lot of the most recent history. Finally saw it from PapaSmithy, and now he goes back onto it. So I was really happy to see the Skarner in, and it's actually one of the few ways that the predictability or binary nature of the Rek'Sai is kind of revealed in some ways. Because if you're not popping off levels like Clid was last game, if you are in at any point, you just get ulted and die because you have, health from a Black Cleaver and no other defensive stats short of, say, a Guardian Angel. If you're going to build full damage and your single target, Skarner punishes you really hard whenever you come into a fight, and it's a good pick into Tahm Kench as well. Like, Tahm Kench can get the 2-for-1 special on the Devour from time to time. There's a lot of good ult targets here for the Skarner when you look at SKT's side. The blind pick Gnar was a surprising one. This to me is something that must have come up in scrims between week 1 and week 2. The only champion here that I look at that's banned that makes me think Gnar was more likely than it was if that champion wasn't banned is Neeko. And if you watched our first VOD review of the day, you'll know that I sometimes confuse Neeko and Gnar. They both have pretty similar play patterns in terms of how they lane. Like, Gnar is generally a strong laner, but very conditional in his team fighting. It either pops off, or he's too late, or he's exhausted at the wrong time. You need quite a lot of things put together in order to pull off a Gnar team fight. And then if you're split pushing, yes, it does straddle the line between split pusher and team fighter when played perfectly, but you also sometimes get the worst of both worlds. So I guess he just looked at it and said, all right, Gnar is going to have pretty consistent priority on the Sylas. And to be honest, your read here as G2 is that you're probably almost 100% going to have Gnar versus Sylas, because SKT have been last picking for mid lane most of the time. But Faker doesn't seem to want to play a Ryze counterpick. You actually have the ability to make Ryze not an amazing champion in this game. When Ryze is a flex pick, it sucks the most because he has some good mid lane matchups and a lot of great top lane matchups. However, in this scenario, you know it's Ryze mid, and Ryze mid actually has a lot of bad matchups in multiple different ways. Like, when it comes to actually killing him in lane, yes, that's a little bit harder, but Malzahar can be good into Ryze. Vel'Koz is very strong into Ryze. You can kind of just stand and deliver and kill him if you're able to land all of your ult. There's a lot of matchups in mid lane where Ryze can actually be taken down. Cassiopeia is one that goes from left to right. Syndra's one. Like, there's a lot of different matchups. Ryze is actually very good against Azir. But the moment you know it's mid lane Ryze, that's where you actually have a counterpick advantage. And it actually also does G2 a bit of a favor. Because I think one of the reasons it's Gnar in the top side is because they needed AD damage from the top side of the map. Skarner doesn't really do any damage. And if it ended up being double AP on the side of G2, then you might have mixed damage considerations. And then the Gnar solves that. And it's a champion that can 1-3-1 very well. But if you want to 1-3-1 and do AD damage and Jace is banned, you're like, there's not a lot left. Jace and Neeko were the two preeminent top lane physical 1-3-1 champions that have a strong guaranteed laning phase against flex options. And both of them were taken out. So it ends up being Gnar. Again, a bit of a surprise with how the tournament had gone. But SKT actually don't counterpick them in the mid lane, which was to me a really big surprise. They send Ryze mid lane against the Sylas. So Sylas mid lane against the Ryze. I think that Ryze is very competitive in that matchup. And they go for this Victor into Gnar. And Victor's a champion that SKT fall back to, that a lot of other teams dropped. I actually gave this info to G2, ironically. It didn't actually affect this series at all, but when I saw G2 in Korea when they were boot camping, that do you have any reads on SKT? And I said, well, the one thing I know is that they'll pretty liberally go Victor top lane. A lot of other teams have dropped this, but they'll go Victor into Kennen a lot. Like, this is a matchup that Koreans really like. And the Victor into Gnar is not quite the same, but it is similar. Gnar doesn't actually have as much shove as you think he does. Yes, in the perfect case, the Boomerang can do that, but in general, it's a lot of auto attack priority that Gnar uses to take over the lane, and Victor has the advantage over specifically Kennen that Victor can shove a minion wave and harass the enemy champion, and that's why SKT like to play him. A lot of other teams dropped him after the chain nerfs to his kit, but also his items that he builds. But SKT are still a Victor team. I think in no way did that affect this draft at all, because it was picked as a counter pick rather than like a Victor into Kennen scenario. But it is something I put out there that like SKT still do play Victor. It's a champion that I think polarizes a lot of people. It's not a leak, right? Because they did it on stage. I would never leak anything internal about either side. I already told this story, but when I was at the G2 Gaming House, they said, oh, by the way, if any team picks Jace against us, we have a pocket pick that beats it. And it's a really crazy champion. But I didn't go to SKT and say they've got a crazy pocket pick, because that's just not what you do. I would never leak anything. But you hear a lot as a caster, that's for sure. But it's just kind of like when we were talking about IG not sending the Ryze to split push when they could have got a guaranteed advantage or close to a 90-10 guaranteed advantage out of that. Not counterpicking Ryze here to take Victor versus Gnar made SKT's draft a lot weaker. It feels like a really low impact 5th pick. And it was a very big surprise to me that they kind of got away with Ryze versus Sylas. That I think is really good for Ryze at basically all points of the game. I think Ryze beats Victor in the side lane very easy at most points of the lane. And I think that the level of counterpick here on the Gnar is pretty small. So I think it was kind of a scattered decision-making draft from SKT, where is this draft better than G2's? As 1-3-1, I would say 100% not. I think I'd take Ryze Gnar almost any day of the week. In terms of pure team fighting, I think both of them have conditionals. Victor and Gnar, I think, are very unreliable champions in any sort of team fight. I think the Skarner greater than Rek'Sai means that SKT's team fight is like, if SKT get a lead through chain ganking the Gnar and then get bot lane turret and you're like TPing around with Abyssal Voyage and using all the utility that Tahm Kench and Ashe can provide, I understand how that leads to a victory. But I actually think that SKT gave a lot and got very little from the draft here. Quiet early game. Remember, we're jumping into just a single VOD review here of a series that's already 4 games in. It's game number 4. This is probably like 3.5 hours into the series as well. Maybe more, because we had all the pauses. So it's been a really long series already. A lot of info given over by G2 here. So SKT actually has a nice level 1 because Rek'Sai's not spotted on the camp she starts, even though you kind of expect Rek'Sai to do a full topside clear. And Teddy and Mata get control of the minion wave. You really want control of the minion wave whenever Tahm Kench is in the game, whether you're on the Tahm Kench's side or not, because Tahm Kench sucks level 1 and has a lot of lane presence level 2. So the race to level 2 for and against the Tahm Kench is pretty massive. First access to level 2, so that's a big win. So Teddy and Mata now have basically a free lane guaranteed, so that's a nice kind of pickup for them against Varus Braum, or Varus Tahm Kench in the sort of lanes we had. And there was Deep Vision down. And that's kind of my one criticism of G2 is that SKT had a lot of level 1 plans in this series that G2 had very kind of defensive level 1s. I thought SKT was really on point with their level 1s. It plays into that theory I have that G2's early game is not strong, but their, early mid. It's so hard to kind of separate the game with how fast the games are, but I think G2 during kind of the, first item phase actually doesn't necessarily make that many big plays. Waiting for this gank on Khan. Problem with Victor. So when you know the jungle pathing, we saw the Rek'Sai, right? This is pretty cool. So let's talk about how this all happens. Rek'Sai does full topside clear, doesn't get the topside scuttle, as we know. That was picked up by the Skarner. But watch what Rek'Sai does. Clid knows there's a lot of vision topside. Clid does what you see a lot of junglers do. They walk straight through mid lane, they put the Q down the minion wave, they start walking towards the bot side. You know that G2 have no wards around the bot side because it's early in the game. And Clid says, by the way, I'm going to go kill that scuttle. Also, I'm Rek'Sai, one of the strongest creative ganking junglers in the game. You better walk away from this minion wave that Sylas has. Like, it's so hard to approach minion waves when you know Rek'Sai's in the area. Because she just showed herself in mid lane, right? So that tells you that now Cap's going to have to play defensively because he's paranoid about being Rek'Sai ganked. Jankos knows probably that... Jankos knows that Rek'Sai is going to be bottom side and that no one's going to be there for a counter gank. And that's why he goes for this gank. The gank timing here is relevant. Notice that Jankos is a Predator jungler who's ganking before his first back. Most Predator junglers back before this point. So at 24 CS, usually you're going for a back timing. However, the counter matchup that SKT opted into by last picking this Victor is the matchup against Gnar. You need to overextend for this matchup to work, just like we talked about with the Syndra. So it's a really good gank timing here. There's no chance of a counter gank. Rek'Sai just used all of her power to show bot side. And it was, to me, the first time this series where Jankos was pathing was significantly ahead of Clid's was 3 minutes into game number 4 of the series. This was actually a really, really smart team move from G2, where SKT tried to cut their losses and guarantee a scuttle and also mid prio by cutting aggressively through mid lane. And G2 turned it into getting down Victor's flash and making Victor a CS for CS champion rather than a champion that could overextend and grow a lead against Gnar. So this is good shot calling from G2. Really nicely done by them. Because now, as you notice, Victor only gets to push in the minion wave against the Gnar if Clid is there camping a brush to allow it to happen. Like, this sucks so much. Watch Clid. Like, Clid is coming topside for a counter gank at this point, but would love to pull it off because all of Clid's camps are bot side. And, he's full health. He's a Rek'Sai. Instead, Clid has to go topside, sit in a brush, and give up the entire bot side. So all the rubber banding of the camps is going to be significantly delayed because the first clear of the jungle is so slow. The blue buff transfer is going to be at a weird time. G2 making the smart adaptive call of ganking topside when there was never going to be a counter gank wastes a lot of Clid's time. And already, when you pause now, Clid is 2 camps down on a Skarner as Rek'Sai compared to a game where he just went 10 kill Rek'Sai. Remember, he just super hard carried game number 3 before this game happens. And now he's been forced to drop the Hail of Blades. Remember, he's gone Conqueror this game because if you go Hail of Blades against Skarner, you just don't get a keystone because you dive in and get ulted, and then your Halo Blades will never proc because you're just dying too fast. You're in Conqueror for a more extended fight because burst fights don't work against Skarner's ultimate. So he's gone Conqueror for those extended fights, and he's always going to be way behind. He's 2 camps behind, he's a level behind, and just having to go topside after Jankos' successful gank has basically undone Clid's chance of ever hard carrying this game. That sounds like I'm being like super hindsight's 50-50 rose-tinted glasses, but if you just present these data points of Skarner is 2 camps ahead at 4 minutes, something had to go wrong in the game for that to happen, and you just saw Clid pop off on Rek'Sai, so it's not like this is a bad player or anything like that. Like, this is actually a huge lead for G2 and the sort of draft they want to pull off. And someone in chat was asking, why did Clid even go topside after the Skarner gank? If you noticed, I'll show you why. Here's what happens. If you don't go topside, this lane state leads to a freeze by Wunder under his turret, and then you're no flash Victor, unable to quickly enough push in the wave, and then you die to Jankos' next gank even after a back. Like, you die to every Predator gank every time, and you might even die to a non-Predator gank. So he's there topside for a counter gank to allow Khan to push this minion wave. He has to give up 3 camps on the bot side and any sort of camp respawns just so Khan doesn't die, and that's with Khan being given the counter pick. And again, just like we're talking about with not using IG's lead around the Rise in our first review of the night, if you're going to pick a counter pick that falls away when your flash is down, that's already very risky. And unfortunately, Clid has to baby this counter pick through. Otherwise, it just straight up loses and it completely fails as a 5th pick. So this is really, really harsh onto Clid. But it shows that G2 made the right adaptation to the Rek'Sai showing in mid lane and establishing that she wanted the bot side scuttle. And then this still happens, right? Victor gets back. Who was put down this ward? So the ward is actually pinged out. Okay, so what happens is Clid walks up and puts down a ward as his back is channeling, but it's in the ward of G2, so it's pinged out. And that means that Jankos can pop the Skarner, pop the Predator at the perfect time. This ward is the perfect ward spot, but because it's scouted out by the earlier ward, you just pop the Predator earlier and Khan just amusingly dies. Really good play by G2 here. This is their best early game of this series and one of the most impressive I've seen. Funnily enough, I have a really impressive G2 early game point to talk about in the TL series in our next review. But yeah, really well played by G2. Didn't see enough of that Jankos, I think, or that G2 playing around their jungler in this tournament. Didn't need it, they're still champions, but it was nice to see G2 make such cool moves there. This is really good too. I'd love to talk to... Next time I see Jankos, I'm going to ask him what the pre-game chatter is, because this is really good stuff as well. Jankos backs. They got the... If you remember, Jankos pathing, he cuts through mid lane. He takes down Raptors in vision. But SKT start up the Drake with their mid laner instead of their mid laner going for a back timer. So they're trying to surprise G2 with this move because they're not having their mid laner counter shop. But G2 know there's no way for Faker to stay in lane against a freshly shopped Rise. And if Faker's on the Drake, they're feeling pretty confident to fight. So the moment they see that Faker's not on the Drake and that he's backing second, they see that Clid has given up his whole health bar to make this play happen. It's very easy to chase them off of the objective, right? I think SKT was just trying to take one under the noses of G2, and Ocean Drake obviously has huge value for both teams here. It's double mages, like Victor and Silas dream of Ocean Drakes. Ashe as well. It might be the highest value Ocean Drake in recent memory. But just this decision of Clid soloing it after a non-preferential recall, that was pretty greedy. And Clid takes a lot of damage from Ocean Drake. Like, Clid's 50% health before any of this starts, and G2 already ahead. Second assertive call that's been pulled off really well by G2. Stuff like this, again, like my point, this evolving battlefield or G2 being able to make really good calls, I think it's the decisions they're making here. When the information is given to them, they've made pretty much like best-in-class decision multiple things in a row. They see the Rek'Sai cut through mid, best-in-class decision, get that flash top side. They see the ward go down, Predator gank is perfect. They get the preferential back timing in mid lane, well, what could be happening around the bot side? Like, so far, they've made really good decisions, and I think SKT would have been able to get away with some of these moves against IG because IG play a bit more binary, of kind of default to see hero, kill hero a lot, but I think G2 are always really creative and precise about their decisions in a way that has impressed me just watching them in LEC, and that they were definitely able to translate to the MSI stage. Was Wonder's TP of any relevance here? I think, honestly, it wasn't the best teleport, if we're going to be honest. If you want to rag them on something, I think the TP there was just for insurance, but you kind of understand why you went for it. So how did this happen? So Tahm Kench tries to battle on take an Infernal and just dies. So Clid's going topside to try to help out with the 1v1. This is really rubbish play from Mata. You just lost the Drake in the area, so you know you don't have vision supremacy. Why does he walk up and try to kill a control ward? Only thing he had was first roam from Faker, but Faker was only roaming to get honey fruit. Really weird stuff. Top side, SKT get a counter kill, so overall it's not a huge out trade. But that should have been a 1-for-0. Mata had no reason to die in that scenario. Mata dying means that Teddy gets pushed out of lane. If you watch how this play starts at this point, talk about what happens from here, right? Rek'Sai goes top side, they kill the Gnar. Should have been a 1-for-0, but Mata dies bot side. And you might say, okay, it's 1-for-1 overall. Please note the CS advantage Ashe has. Ashe has a 12 CS advantage over Varus. This laning phase had gone really well for the Ashe Varus. And then when we get to this point, where Ashe is being zoned off of minion waves, because Mata's dead, remember. Mata also died at level 5. This is after the 1-for-1 kill. Mata only rejoins now, and look at how much has changed. The CS gap is closed. Teddy had to flash, and they're still going to have troubles getting back to the minion waves. So all of this is a flow-on effect from Mata being far too bold with his face check. It's never just a 1-for-1 when it's bot side of the map. When you're top lane, it can be a 1-for-1 because it's much harder to maintain freezes. There's not a second person that gets fucked over when you make a mistake. But when it's bot side, your AD carry, who only can walk up to waves because Tahm Kench is there to devour, gets screwed over in a scenario like this really hard. It's just very lazy against a Predator jungler. Really lazy. Really, really lazy. I'm getting my French out before the season starts, by the way. This was awesome. Wonder when they called this play. Ashe Arrow on the minimap, pings on, Abyssal Voyage with the jungler. This was just pure ecstasy from SKT. Super cool play. Korean teams and Ashe. Always beautiful to see. Even the ending of the play. The synergy here for the missing health damage. There's just there's no way out for Perks. He doesn't have flash, so it doesn't matter that much, but I see the Braum. How did that work? Let's see that interaction. I guess tunneling overrides. Is there an untargetable frame during it? I don't know. I don't know how that interaction works. It shouldn't work. Oh. Are there any untargetable frames when you go in? I guess it was a bug. Today I learned. Even such a beautiful play shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have overridden. Good call, chat. Well, we can skip over the nice extended break we have here. Yeah, I thought only the ultimate had an untargetable frame, so now that you guys point to it, that interaction there is unlikely. G2 get a free Rift Herald because even after the gank, Victor has no priority topside. Like, Victor's just straight losing top lane, which you can't really afford to happen when bot side's also making mistakes. That's hurting Teddy. Like, Teddy was winning this lane, but no longer after all the problems from the top side have been generated. It's like Jankos 7 is everywhere on this Skarner. So in game number 2, when SKT tried a scaling draft against G2, a play like this, an attempt to punish, makes sense. But the problem that SKT have is they try to turn this with a Victor teleport. A Victor is right next to Gangplank as one of the worst teleport users because he comes in with super conditional CC in his W. At least Gangplank has his ult to start up things, but Victor shows up and then kind of wants to get into a fight. But I love the call here because the TP comes in. They don't know where Victor is. They assume he's coming from a flank. So G2 don't try to move out defensively. If they all went defensively back here, you could actually die as G2. But instead, they just go further aggressive. They get the free kills in front of them, and all Khan can do is come in, proc his summon Airy with an E, and back away. So SKT don't actually have the tools here to fight 5v5. They just try to make a very set-piece teamfight play. With a teleport top laner, but the teleport top laner is Victor. You should never teleport here. Like, the moment that this happens, SKT walks away and Victor gets 2 turret plates. Like, you lose one person probably to a Skarner ult. Remember, we could have disengaged. The play could have ended here, but instead they make a proactive let's fight call with a Victor flank teleport, which is really bad from SKT. And G2 don't bite the bait, right? They just actually keep going forward, meaning that wherever the flank is, it doesn't matter. And they accept their free kills. It's their reward for a good early game. That's a really poor call by SKT with the draft that they have. And a good call from G2. Chat's saying IG call. I mean, yeah, IG were making similar mistakes the day before. Walking out, Rift Herald charge. They get the bot lane turret, and that means that Ashtam Kench isn't going to have first shout at map rotation. 1,700 gold lead from the AD carry over the enemy, mostly because of things that were outside of the 2v2. In the 2v2, Ash was up in CS and up in gold, but ever since Amada's failed control ward clear on the bot side, and to some degree the mistake on trying to take down the early Ocean Drake, the flow-on effect is that now Teddy is super far behind in terms of gold. Rek'Sai, as you could just see for a second there. Rek'Sai is the same goal. This is not a pop-off Rek'Sai game, and we already talked about how Skarner answers Rek'Sai in the 5v5. None of SKT's tools they invested in, especially not the Victor versus Gnar, are working out. Stopwatch here is no good. Khan has supreme confidence in his Victor. We already talked about how it's a staple of his champion pool. He plays a lot of it in solo queue as well, but it was kind of fanciful for me to him take it into the into the Gnar on this Victor. Because now you're a G2 comp that, yes, it functions best 1-3-1, but it's an insane pick comp. Realm Warp, Skarner ult, Varus ult. They have a lot of pick power on the side of G2 and a gold lead. And from ahead, you can get those picks, get the early Baron, and then just 1-3-1 SKT to death. So while this game wasn't as summarily won by G2 as I thought the early game shaped up to be, they did play this game a lot better than SKT. It's a mistake by Mata. If you're wondering about where the mistake from Mata is, that's the mistake. You never turn around here. Either you devour early and probably die anyway, or you don't devour at all. Instead, he tried to do both. If you notice here, his decision is, oh, I'll walk towards and devour him. Oh, wait, never mind. He's going to die anyway. If he had just fully disengaged himself, he would have lived, but he made the call to turn too late. Feels like an old man mechanics, old man brain move there. Mata had a very weak MSI. For sure. Very, very weak. Teddy has flash, is being talked about in chat, but if he flashes, like, you have to think about how to play to this. If Mata keeps walking, he lives. If Teddy wants to flash at some point, when is that point, right? You could try to flash into Devour range, I guess, or you just don't flash, so he doesn't flash. But you should never get double killed there. Like, getting double killed there requires you to make significant mistakes as a duo. Both of them made mistakes there. I think only Teddy should die. If you flash into Tahm Kench, Skarner ults both. Good point, absolutely. And Skarner's flashes up as well. So the only person who gets away there is Mata. Instead, Mata dies because he turns. He's not decisive in his call. He tries to do a bit of everything and ends up dying. So that was very poor from Mata. All of SKT's control vision is kind of peculiar, right? SKT are fighting super hard for vision topside. Rek'Sai clearing vision. They put down 3 control wards topside around no objective as Drake is about to spawn. And the best thing they can do from their vision is try this play, right? A really kind of long-range Ashe ult that doesn't hit like the previous one. A fool me once, fool me twice scenario. It's actually quite a lot of useless vision put down by SKT on the top side. And this Wonder Teleport, actually, like, that was much, like, the Wonder Teleport did nothing in the previous teleport. Wonder's TPs haven't been that good this game, but that's just because Cass is already raid boss. He was already looking like a double kill. That was a 2v1 there. A lot of SKT's core strength they showed in their consistent victories before this game are completely off. Even though they're the team up 2-1, SKT have made a lot of mistakes this game, and as I mentioned, I'm not convinced about their draft. And the panic stations are in things like mid. That's a Oblivion, or so not Oblivion, that's a Spellbinder advantage over Faker, regardless of whether he needs to shop soon or not. Like, that is a huge item lead over a Silas. Khan is showing he's going Iceborne Gauntlet, and that build has been so super nerfed. I don't understand why he ended up going tank build this game, because, like, you're not a frontliner, you're a Victor. And yes, Victor can provide wave clear, but actually if you don't build ability power, you can't take advantage of the buff damage into E, nerf damage into Q. And the game has already snowballed away so much that the map state is never going to be you and Gnar trading Qs and Es at 30 minutes. Like, the point in the game in which these stats are relevant was way before. This feels like a really poor item build. I think you have to go full ability power in group, or full ability power, take super defensive route to side lanes, clear the 1 minion wave, and then, like, defensively come back to your team. You're never actually trading Q for Q with a Gnar. As this game has gone. So I think the item build here is really poor from Khan. Oh. Well, we won't forget this moment. Let's talk about how this all starts. So, in this moment, you look at the map state here. G2 have cleared out all the vision that we talked about SKT wasting topside and starting to get control. Baron hasn't spawned, so it's not like this vision is important to play to. G2 want the mid lane outer turret before Baron spawns. That's why they're A-ramming in this case and walking up there. They know they're in a pretty significant lead. We know it's 5,000 gold lead, and Ryze especially is like monstrously strong. They have control wards in all their entrances, so as they come up, SKT won't know when to expect them. So Victor just walks in a very lazy path. Like, Victor walks in from this angle, I assume for one reason and one reason only, and that's to try to laser the minion wave from the side. He's just afraid of coming from the middle, which it just seems mostly lazy, given that it's lion wave clear that goes through people. Maybe not Braum, but, you know. It gets instantly engaged on. So, like, that's pretty lazy from his side, but Mada uses everything to get him out there. Perks takes a lot of damage because he walks up too far. Yeah, that's a full rotation coming through from the Victor. But then you get to see Faker. Like, this play, like, after this play happened, people like, oh, it's a bit overpowered that Gnar can ult people, and it's not conditional based on like a mini Gnar mega Gnar. So when you Silas steal away the Gnar ult, you don't have the conditionality of needing to be mega Gnar. You can always use it. And they're like, oh, that's a bit overpowered. That shouldn't be like that. But consider how this is not Faker with the big, like, you know, circle above his head saying, by the way, I stole mega Gnar. Like, this is a super awesome play from Faker. Because consider how much time there is to react. Faker has ult available, doesn't use it. They got good health bar chunkages just a moment before. Chunkage is a fun word. And then watch how quick and heads up this play is. Even though Mada doesn't know this is coming. Mada's definitely not ready for this, right? Clid is just investigating. Like, this is one flowing play. Watch. There is no break in the play. Watch. R into instant E. Flash R. Like, this is insanely decisive from Faker. On the level of like Rookie's solo carry LeBlanc game the game before. And it almost solo wins them the game. A game where SKT has played so poorly in a lot of ways. We're not a big fan of their draft. We talked about how their vision's in a weird spot. They've made poor trades. G2 have made some nice pathing decisions in the early game that got the Victor behind. Almost all of that doesn't matter because Faker is just a god. Like, this play is so good. R, as the chain is still in the air, first E flash, doesn't use the second E, use that later to stun and get further AoE damage. Like, a 5,000 gold lead and map control as Baron is about to spawn that might end the game with Baron control at 20. All because one player decides they're the best of all time. Awesome. Just awesome. Everyone knows the interaction now. If you have Silas and still Gnar ultimate, you can always use it. But that interaction is not overpowered. Being Faker and being that decisive is what makes it look overpowered. Because just like what we talked about before, where Mada's face check lost so much bot side, the amount of pressure you relieve making a play like this is huge. No longer is there 3 control. Like, look at the mini-map now. G2 own everything around Baron. They have control wards everywhere on the top side. They're going to take down mid lane outer turret and then make the game about a realm warp into the Baron pit like every Ryze blue side team does. And it's a 5,000 gold lead. And then we watch through the replay in 1.5 times speed, so not doing it for the Craig Chasm value this time. But with Mada out of the fight, you know, in a 4v5, Faker goes in, they get multiple kills, they close the gold lead, and I want you to look at the minimap after this replay is done. Suddenly, There are no more G2 control wards. In fact, SKT have a sneaky ward next to the enemy blue to spot them. There's no Baron control at 20 minutes. They were able to push up and get some good back timings on players who were behind. This is what we call this is what momentum shifts are actually doing. It's not, well, the enemy team was getting 6 kills in a row, now SKT is getting 6 kills in a row. It's the game state where SKT were afraid to push forward and get wards and put down control wards is in an instant, because of Faker's outplay, changed. 3,200 damage. Damn. What path did Khan take to die? When was Na? So Na's never been seen. Okay, Na I assume pushed in that minion wave. They expect the vision where it is, and then hop over. That's really cute. This is a good play. I thought this was just Khan being an idiot, but if you watch the mini-map, went into Mininar, waited where they knew they wouldn't be spotted by vision, and if you watch here, watch the circles, Nar hops over the wall to make this play. He doesn't get spotted by this ward to do it. Really smart to actually make that play. The only reason they get this kill is because Wonder hops over the wall, hops around vision, and then Skarner's there to back it up. It's actually a good play. That's not an XD Victor play. That's actually a smart play from the Nar. Faker, man. I didn't see how Perks died. Let's watch the main fight here. Cleared flash, double flash. Okay. Just a single flash too. And then you're able to chase and there's no threat on Teddy. So Perks is too far up, not knowing what's on the left side. And that means with an 80 carry advantage, there's no way for SKT not to chase down, right? Faker has blue buffs, so has unlimited chase power. Faker, man. Faker still Skarner ult. Yes, that happened also. Let's get back to that. Let's watch the replay of this for a second. I didn't see this when I was casting the game, actually. Watch. So Faker gets the Skarner ult on caps. That part makes sense. We knew about that, obviously. But he actually eased to extend it, a bit like how Thresh Lantern can be taken during the suppression, and that's why caps goes under turret. Or into a range where you can't kite away the Ashe. Problem with Sylas. It's why Sylas needs to be heavily nerfed. It's not just that he steals everyone else's ultimate and gets an AP ratio on them. It's that his regular abilities are so powerful, but his ultimate is not gated by how strong his regular abilities are. You can't have a strong ultimate if all 3 of your other abilities are strong. But I think that Sylas has a wave clear ability. His E is one of the strongest straight up abilities in the game. And he gets everyone's ults. And that's ridiculous. And there's no way out. 2 plays from Faker later. You know, only a 3,000 gold lead. A lot of G2's map control is gone. They're chasing for kills. Good early channel on the realm warp there. And now we're kind of in an even game. I guess, yes, it's 2,500 gold, but core items are done on everyone. The only issue that SKT have is that Victor's kind of useless, doesn't really do anything in this build. You know, with a couple of Hex Cores and Iceborne Gauntlet doesn't even have perfect Hex Core for the W to be doing something in team fights. All he can be is a kind of crappy frontliner. And Nar is going to be able to beat him pretty easily in the 1v1. Wits End Black Cleaver, 5 points in Hyper, and there's no way that Victor can match him. Perfect hex score done. Very late perfect hex score at 23 minutes. G2 still have a lot of map control. I think that's largely because of their champs and how the early game has gone. Oh boy. Hurts to see it even in the replay. So, what do SKT know before this happens? Ashe backs away. SKT know they don't have control of their red side jungle. Perkz can walk up because he has a lane control ward. He sees Ashe backing, right? So they understand that. That's probably why Jankos feels so strong to walk up. Like Jankos and Ryze can walk up because Ashe is definitely not there and would have to teleport to be there, and they'd see that channel. And then Ashe teleports onto this structure. And Perkz' first thought is going to be, let's kill this turret. But because Jankos and Caps got the early introduction to walk up, smartly, he only autos once. Funny thing is, Perkz actually almost doesn't get this kill because he does auto once. Look, one auto, and then fully puts it together, right? And it still ends up being a really smart play, so still credit to Perkz for that decision. But he dumps one auto in, and just like we talked about Domino's earlier, like this is another Domino's moment for sure. Should be sponsored by Domino's. I'll talk to Domino's Korea, see if I can get a stream sponsorship going. Like, this is a... I looked at this play, and I know some people gave the feedback, like, you should really reward Perkz for not killing the turret. And I didn't do that on card. I was focused on Teddy's TP, because for Teddy's decision, you never teleport. It's like, it's not quite, you know, never follow Singe level of, like, truism in League of Legends, but anyone who's ever taken teleport knows you never teleport on a single sliver of health teleport, right? Because your teleport's going to be wasted. Like, it's going to go on cooldown. You're not going to get what you want to get. And he wants to fight, obviously. So you always teleport on either the minion wave to slow it down or the inner turret here. And Perkz does hit the turret once and then makes the smart adaptive call not hit it again. Which, so, you know, however much do you want to, like, say he was lucky or he made a 200 IQ play, like Papa's 200 IQ in the chat, like, it's kind of a 50-50 there. But it's a 0 IQ play from Teddy either way. So that's kind of why I just went in hard on Teddy here. It's just awful teleport. Because Teddy loses in the game in two ways. Because here, he backs in a pretty conspicuous spot. So that means that Caps and Jankos can walk up and try to pick Klid or Tahm Kench. And then he also dies. You know what I mean? Like, he condemns one of his allies to death because his teleport is... because his back timing is in vision, and then he teleports in the tier 2 and dies. Like that's a double whoopsie. Like, not often do you double whoopsie. But they lose the maximum, and this is after Faker has, like, pulled off the massive ultimate into the chase down kill after the Skarner steal as well. G2 a clutch, man. This is some clutch plays. Yes, it required Teddy to make a huge mistake. But whenever G2 get... in a scenario like this, where we get to where it's... in this scenario, where it's like, should I kill this turret? Should I not? Can we push up? Can we not? Can we die of an inner turret at 24 minutes when we just lost 2 team fights? And I had to put my... if you pause it and say... which teams in the world would you want to be playing G2's champions at 24 minutes 17 in this match? I think G2 are the best in the world at it. They're the best in the world at being like, this is the scenario we're in. These are all the crazy things that have led to it. How do we win from here? And how do we get the maximum? I think G2's mid game is so good. These are scenarios that they are so good at getting the maximum out of. And yes, it requires mistakes to set up that premise. But given the premise... I think G2 play it super well. They go off to the Baron. They take an assertive Baron now. They know that Teddy's TP is not down. This is definitely a time you finish Baron. Wanda knows his role of just slowing down. And they don't just accept... how many teams just accept the Baron here in a 4v4? Instead, they look at SKT and say, huh, You have a tank Victor. Your Rek'Sai is not ahead. It's actually a level behind the Skarner, and we talked about how the early game didn't go this way. Faker is scary for sure, but it's just Faker and a Tahm Kench, and then none of your other damage threats are strong. We've got the AD carry advantage, and we got chased down with an AD carry disadvantage after Perks died not 3 minutes ago. In a 5v4, how much can we get done? Well, the answer is a lot. Good flash R. Good chase for further kills. Realm Warp's great. Well played by G2. And there's the good point from chat here. Wonder backs away. He's poking at this point. Obviously, I have vision of him now. He throws the house. I disagree with chat. Wonder knew they didn't see him. They know he's there, right? Because he just threw a house. Instead, SKT, you know, you can only play around so many different things. They don't play around the right thing, and G2 slammed them. So they definitely know he was there. And this goes... We had such a swingy game because now we're up to a 7,000 gold lead after this big play. They should have known even without the house is a good point as well. I would have said that, but thankfully we don't need to have the conjecture, Milkman, because they actually saw the house. Now G2 can play multiple lanes. Look at this! Multiple lane play with a Rise. Insane. They're not going bot lane just yet, but to their credit, they have a lot of pick power, so you understand why. Where's Nar going? You got a group! Sorry, I've been battered by watching IG. It's a bigger map when G2 plays it. Probably the biggest, what's the word? The biggest compliment I can give G2 is they open up the map and make it feel bigger. And that's what you gotta do. They're playing 3 lanes. They're getting advantages in 3 lanes. Their 1-3-1 is one of their strengths. Now, they had a 1-3-1 fail game in the group stage, which kind of put pause on talking about their 1-3-1. They actually failed a 1-3-1 game, but this was a lot stronger of a 1-3-1 game. I want to watch this replay to see what the Realm Warp in combat was. When does he start casting the Realm Warp? He starts casting it after the Gnar ultimate went down. Does it end up being big? I couldn't really tell. So he puts down the Realm Warp as an escape strategy. It doesn't really do a lot. Sorry, after the dodging of Requiems, I'm always giving combat Realm Warps a bit more of a close look. Bot lane's pushing in. Mickey is the god of split pushing with Baron as a support. Let's be real. We all remember his Rakan backdoor in the match of the century, G2 versus Fnatic. So he brought up the minion wave and bot that's pressured, and they make Baron look so strong with a Rise comp. It's such a counterpoint to our first review. That was Hilly, you're right. My apologies to Hillisang. That was Hilly. I misremembered. Give Hilly a shout out. Papa was wrong on that one. But anyways, watching this replay, they learned from one of the best in the world, Hilly on the Rakan, with some of these plays. I'm enjoying watching him go on kind of a merry walk here. Mickey walks top, tries to help, goes and finds the minion wave as they push in for further kills, tanks up the turret. Everything falls into place when it's G2. And again, you're struck by how much more straightforward this closeout is to IG miring around in the previous game. Mickey didn't even play in that game. Good point. Napoleon de Stratège. I'm not going to say strategy. Because the actual fights here, with it not being a team fight comp from G2, like when it's not with them getting a pick advantage, you see that SKT is still competitive, 10,000 gold down. They're getting picks left, right, and center. Wonder's doing a silly bugger's business on the top side. And the game wasn't over here. Like, this is, remember, match point for SKT. And they're still winning team fights at match point. At least one didn't die. So let's see when this TP comes in. So it's very likely that Braum and Varus are resetting. They make the TP play. They all pile in. Skarner ulti the MVP in that one. So the Baron throw we're not going to see in game number 5 because I'm only reviewing game number 4. We won't get to review. This is a good Baron from SKT. The reason is that they've lost both inhibitors and they'll never be able to walk up to Baron again without getting caught by a million different pick options on the side of G2. You are almost certain that Perks and Mickey are on a full reset from base. If you don't make this play, you for sure lose Baron and lose the game anyway. Right? That's what you have to remember here. So this is if we don't do this, we lose anyway. Let's all in try to make this happen. And this is a good Baron from SKT. They rush onto it. Jankos is interrupted. He's in the belly of Tahm Kench as it happens. They kill him. The TP is safe enough from the Sylas. Let's watch where the Sylas TPs, and he has Tahm Kench and Ashe fighting in front of him to guarantee that the TP will complete. Teddy should learn because he TPs onto the correct turret. Well done. This is really good play from SKT. People are laughing about Perks taking red. Perks did not expect SKT to Abyssal Voyage teleport onto Baron after the last teleport lost the game. This is a really good decisive call from SKT, a clutch call from them. And it gets them a Baron that should never have been theirs. This is less clutch when they decide to chase forever onto Caps. Watch Rise damage. Khan, why? Khan's build is so weird. What does Iceborne Gauntlet rush into then finishing Perfect Hexor then Void Staff do? You know what I mean? I think at that point you just build ability power and push the minion wave harder than go Void Staff to chip it than bitter magic resist. Yes, there's Wit's End and Adaptive Helm, but like, you're never going to run down the lane and trade damage with Gnar, so I don't think the Wit's End is relevant for the Void Staff pickup. I think you go flat AP and try to push Rylai's for utility. Liandry's could be considered. I think the Void Staff is really weird if you're going to go Iceborne Gauntlet. The chase is very poor as well. There probably is no good reasoning to find that build. Honestly, if you're going to ask me why he went Void Staff, it's probably that he had a Blasting One and had the right gold back timing to buy it, you know? And now SKT could still win this game after G2 had such an awesome early game that should never be possible. Because SKT are feeling the 5v5s. They've outfought them probably like 60-40 in 5v5s this game. And they're just thinking that Faker will find the right Gnar ultimate that wins them the game. So they've fought really, really hard. But while you're watching the last bits of this game, again, you're going to have to keep a lot of eyes on the minimap and on the big screen. So big screen and small screen here, guys, for the VOD review to understand how the close happens. So far, this is good. To give you a clear... They're trying to force in one lane. That part's correct. Pushing up with the Baron buff is correct. They see Rise walk into the brush, and Teddy tries to interrupt the recall with an Ash Arrow, Prey style. And there's actually a team call here. Good, very important for this team call. Where does the Ash Arrow come out? Does he do it in Vision? Ah. Teddy's not quite on Prey's level. If you guys recall the very famous Ash Arrow from Prey that stopped the game, he was out of Vision when he did it. Both the one for Longshoot and the one for Ox Tigers. This one is in turret vision when he shoots the Ash Arrow. So they can tell Rise that Ash Arrow is on the way. It wouldn't have been spotted on any wards. G2 didn't have any wards on the bottom side. So because of that, they were able to see it a lot earlier. Because if you get an interrupt on Rise's recall here, just the Narspa pushing wouldn't have been enough to pick up the victory. So far it's fine, but now as SKT you have to full recall. The problem is, at this point you've lost the game. So, the moment that Rise rejoins the minion wave, you have to full recall, otherwise you lose the game, unless you get an ace on the 3 members. The 3 members remaining, it's 2 flashes, one up on Perks, one up on Mickey. And all they have to do is not die, because they'll have enough wave clear under turrets that they'll always trade up in the 1-3-1. But Faker actually cancels his recall and goes in with Varus ult. Let's watch this Varus ult. Watch in slow-mo. Proto Belt. He has to hit Perks with the Varus ulti, and even then there's a QSS and flash up. But, you know, we're trying to be glass half full from his perspective. They have to hard engage and get the kills here, otherwise it doesn't matter. And already, when you see this, you know they're screwed. Because Mickey's in front of him, he's got his summoners up, he's got the door up. Yankos can buy time, and you're wasting so much time here. Again, the first recall attempt after that play is here, and the Q is being channeled from Perks just to interrupt backs. This is where the game is over. Because Khan has his back stopped. The Redemption goes in. Another back is stopped. No one's back is there. And there's no threat on G2. They can just walk up. They won't die and they can interrupt. They don't get the Abyssal Voyage. And the game's just over. Wanda has to do it his way. But you see it, right? Let's see what if they could have done anything different. If they had put everything onto Wander during the suppression, they could have killed him, but Rise was doing more damage to the Nexus, so that wouldn't have worked. I think the game is over here. Up until this point, they've done everything right. Let's assume that Silas gets out here. Silas and Rek'Sai would have gotten out for sure. And then Abyssal Voyage would have gotten in, and they would have probably lost 1 inhibitor. Instead, they lose the game. So, I think if you look over the review there, there's just... the moment they turn, there's no way back into the game. Faker dragged Wander diagonally instead of straight into the summoner platform. Could they have killed Wander with the Skarner ult? No, he goes straight. So what you actually see is he wiggles his bum at the end to try to keep him in the fountain longer. That's actually perfectly played by Faker. He wiggles his bum to try to keep him in the Gnar in there longer. I think that's actually perfectly played. The Captain Flower special, yes. Again, Skarner mechanic, for people who don't know, to get extra displacement on a Skarner, you turn and then the model ends up behind. So for the first like 0.1, 0.5 seconds, you pull them, and then with like, 0.3 of a second left, you turn around and it ends up displacing them more. Let's watch to see People are saying you should have taken him top right. Now, you said diagonally. Now, that would be diagonally. He literally took him straight. When does the fountain laser arm? Let's have a look. Fountain laser arm's about there, right? I can't... especially given the fact that we're watching this in 0.75 second speed, like, there's maybe something to what you're saying, but the fact that he got the bum wiggle in there, like, I think it's fine. Well, you said it yourself earlier, game was slipping away. They felt like if they give up this Baron push, they have no chance to win. The thing is, like, you almost 100% lose on that re-engage. That was like a 1090 play. I think you have to recall there. Like, the first attempt to push with Baron is correct. You never just stay in base with the Baron buff and watch G2 to starve you out, get nothing from Baron. You definitely want to try to find something, but I don't think you can do this secondary re-engage. Onto with the Baron buff there. That's the part where I'm like, I don't know. I don't think that's the right way to go. But again, we're trying to look at something really closely, and we've gone over some of these late game scenarios in previous streams. This is not an egregious one. I think there's almost no way you definitely save the game. What do you think about Perk's overall performance at MSI? I think in general he wasn't shown up that much when it mattered. He had some very poor laning phases, and I think him and Mickey, and like day 3, 4, and 5 of the group stage were actually pretty poor as a duo, but I think he was fine against Teddy and Mata, and I think he was good on the first 2 days of the tournament. So I think given expectations for him, he was fine. So no Game 5 review of that one. I think Game 5 was definitely an interesting game. We'll look over the pick and ban for game number 5. I was trying to decide between which game to review, Game 4 or Game 5 from this series, and I actually think Game 4 was the more important one. I sat there with Vedius and Quickshot after Game 3 ended, and I said, SKT have to win Game 4 or I think they'll lose Game 5. And that's not me just being, like, glass half empty, glass half full. It's just that G2 are a team where if you say it's a best of one for all of it, their playbook is infinite, and SKT are a slow to adapt team that aren't that good at dissecting how to beat a new strategy. And I think in this case, compared to Sonataric, where on second time of asking when they left it open, they had a counterplay for it because they put more games into Sonataric and prep, G2 have so many drafts like this with Pyke, Syndra bot lane. It was so funny talking to the Koreans. I filmed a segment for the SKT official Riot Korea documentary about SKT at MSI. And I loved overhearing the Koreans talk about, like, how could you prepare for it? No one knew Syndra was going bot lane. Meanwhile, when you're in the caster room, instantly when Syndra was locked in, both me and Deficio and Frost were like, all right, this is definitely Syndra bot lane. Like, they don't think about things like that, but this is how G2 think about things. And you know that Teddy has almost no games playing against the Syndra bot lane. The Pyke top lane is, yes, it's putting back a strategy that worked before, but it's the sort of thing that was so symptomatic of how G2 beat SKT. Is that this meta right now, the early game can sometimes be controlled. Like, you remember the games from the G2 loss in the group stage onwards till they beat G2 in the game 1 of this series. SKT beat every team in a best of 1 in a row in very controlled fashion. And if you get an early game lead from Clid popping off and you play very controlled with the early game strong jungler, you can close out games. Like, that's very true. But if your jungler isn't ahead in the early game and you can't be ahead 100% of games you play, actually, it's very hard to play this very methodical style without your jungler being relatively too powerful for the enemy jungler. That can almost never happen. So actually, I look at Clid's performance in that win streak as the reason they leveled up, more so than any adapting to the meta point that we were really thinking about before. Because in this series, you saw the moment that Clid fell away in game number 4, any methodical game plan became way harder, and actually playing an explosive game plan like G2 were was clearly the more correct way to go. Like SKT stayed competitive from a Faker super play and a great Baron, but otherwise it felt like G2 as the bold team and with the stronger pick power were making more things happen in game number 4. So given all of that, I think G2 were the deserving winners of this series, and I think the moment that you loaded up a draft like this with Pyke and Syndra bot lane, SKT actually come in pretty big underdogs stylistically against this sort of G2 draft. They could have won. You know, the big play on the Baron is the one people talk about. I'm not going to review the Baron play here, but if you're wondering my thoughts on the Baron, I think SKT stayed in this game competitive for a lot longer than expected because G2 couldn't take Baron. They didn't have an 80 carry or enough Baron damage to do the Baron. And then when SKT moved towards the Baron, they knew the Baron would square up G2 and be big for them, but their turn was far too slow. SKT starting Baron when they did in game number 5 was correct, but not turning off Baron was actually really bad by SKT. But we saw plenty of SKT making mistakes in game number 4, right? And unfortunately, SKT in game 4 and 5, in the games where you had to be clutch, they weren't. And G2 was smiling, as everyone saw on their comms, and being this like bubbly, fun group of guys that they are. And things like that mattered in this series. Like, there's no way to say they didn't. Those things clearly mattered. So, shout out to G2. They deserve to beat SKT in this series, and not really much else to say here. I think SKT come away from the tournament without a bad reputation. Like, IG come away with everyone mad, like swim back to China levels of mad. But I think losing to G2, who went on to comfortably win the final, and also SKT starting weak and getting noticeably stronger and then taking G2 to 5 games, like, it's disappointing that they didn't win MSI, but it wasn't an embarrassment. Like, I think the LCK was closer to winning this tournament by far compared to where they were at Worlds. And it's one of those things where the only disappointing outcome is if SKT come back and play slow. Like, if LCK is playing slow, SKT and other teams don't learn from this tournament and continue to play slow. Okay, I'm gonna actually be clearer about this. If the LCK comes back and it's methodical team versus methodical team, i.e. they look for a small advantage and try to grow it small advantage by small advantage, and don't take notes from Pyke top lane and the ability to dive and, like, you know, raid the enemy and get huge leads around 15 to 25 minutes and end the game by 25. If the SKT instead plays methodical and gets small lead after small lead after how this MSI went, that's the only really disappointing outcome. We can't know that till we see all 10 teams play a couple of games, but SKT were not that far away from being MSI champions, and hopefully this is the, let's say, second or third reality check, depending on if you include Rift Rival and Asia games, that they need to up the pace a bit. Yes, methodical can work, but methodical can't be your default strategy. You need to default to explosive and fall back to methodical. And that's not what we saw from SKT at MSI. Anyways, that's going to close up the game number 2 VOD review. I'm going to take a short break, go to the bathroom, come back and answer some questions. If you've got questions about that series or anything else, we'll answer those after the break. And then final review of the night. It's going to be MSI Final game number 1. A lot of cool stuff in the early game from G2. And just a chance to, you know, chat. I'm sure we're going to have plenty of people wanting to watch, remember how strong G2 looked, and ask me questions about the tournament and more open things. So, a bit of a different atmosphere for the third and final VOD review of the night. But thank you very much for watching that one, and we'll be back very shortly.